Not all humans are born equal. There are those who will never escape the looming threat of natural disasters, whose lives will be derailed every time floods destroy their house, wash away their families to God knows where. You and I, we can only ever imagine. We're the lucky ones. I'd like to establish that the goal of this debate today, which is in areas prone to disaster, this House believes that states should prioritize disaster mitigation over relocation, is to actually determine which of the two sides can minimize the damage that disasters have to life the most. And then I'd like to go into my definitions. First of all, what is and what qualifies a disaster? It can be any form of event which can be entirely natural, such as tornadoes and tsunamis, or exacerbated by humans, such as flooding and wildfires. Now, disasters that this motion addresses will mostly have significant and large-scale impact, because why would we need mitigation or relocation for like a 2.0 magnitude earthquake, right? Second of all, what does prone to disaster mean? It refers to areas which are most affected, where disasters occur both often and have significant impact. Impact in this debate will basically be how life, be it for humans or other living things, is affected. Now, third of all, what is disaster mitigation? It can be controlling the effects of disaster. It can be controlling factors which contribute to disaster, such as, for example, trash clogging up drainage systems, which worsens floods. And it can also be increasing resilience to disaster in the form of, for example, earthquake-resilient infrastructure. So with that, what is relocation? It mostly manifests in the programs which facilitate displacement of affected people into other locations, and it can be either permanent or temporary. So with that, what is my team's stance? While relocation does have its benefits, it's only a short-term solution. And the most significant benefits that relocation actually offers can also be fulfilled on the side of mitigation. We can offer the same value or even the exact same benefit. And hence we believe that mitigation should be done at a larger magnitude compared to relocation. So with that, I'd like to go on with what is the 4 burdens of proof for this motion. First of all, applicability. How many people can we actually reach in these areas? Second of all, feasibility. What scale can we reasonably apply to either side in a short amount of time? Third of all, benefits. For this, 2 things must be proven. First of all, mitigation gives long-term benefits, and second of all, that long-term benefits are actually more valuable than short-term benefits. And fourth of all, serving state obligations, which is to support the population the most. And with that established, I'd like to go on with my characterizations. First of all, who are the people affected and how are they affected? The areas most prone to disasters right now are actually more rural areas. This is because states all over the world would likely invest a lot into disaster resilience in urban areas, which are basically economic hotspots, which ride on their GDP, right? And rural areas just don't get the same investment, so they are more susceptible to disaster. And the people in rural areas tend to, first of all, have less GDP per capita. Second of all, they tend to have simpler careers, which means they may not be able to sustain themselves in other places because they may not be able to find employment. Third of all, many times they're actually farmers or have their own really small businesses such as tailoring clothes or selling food. So when they are moved, they will lose their livelihood. Further elaborated in the coming points. Now, next, how are they affected? They can lose their homes, they can lose their careers, hence their livelihood, and worst of all, they can lose their lives. Now, the second thing I'd like to characterize is disaster mitigations by a state versus relocation. When it comes to state response, disaster mitigation has a very wide umbrella because it can be done through the 3 main methods I mentioned earlier in the definitions. Mitigating impacts include preventing disaster from spreading, which could be, for example, with wildfires or floods. And because of this, mitigation can include preventative measures which isn't reflected on side opposition. This protects homes, roads, bridges, which are all essential for further measures to take place, including the action of emergency services, right? Now, we can also be controlling factors which lead up to this disaster, which could be cleaning up drainage and preventing soil erosion. And the above tend to have 3 benefits. First of all, disaster prevention. Second of all, disaster minimization. And third of all, other indirect benefits for the population itself. And why do I say this? Wouldn't farmers love a lack of soil erosion? Wouldn't you and I be happy living a place that is clean? And we can also be increasing resilience, which is mostly in the form of infrastructure, which again benefits the people as well, such as earthquake-resilient buildings or direct lines to the city and emergency services. And these benefits remain for long after the said disaster, which means better healthcare access, better emergency response. It doesn't disappear when the disaster ends. Now let's talk about relocation. It costs a lot to do with both quantity and quality in demand, because we need to reach lots of people and actually be not just dropping them off in random safe places. We have to ensure housing, food, water, electricity, etc. for every single household involved. Now I'm not saying that this is a mutually exclusive burden that mitigation must not fulfill. Mitigation must also fulfill quantity and quality, but it does so much more easily than relocation because of the inherent events that take place on our side. Now let's talk about temporary relocation, which is bad, because when they return to ruined houses and broken infrastructure, the loss of what little assets they have, and with the damage that tsunamis and earthquakes all have individually, it's not that easy of a task to rebuild and repair, right? And permanent relocation isn't exactly a good thing either, because as I said before, people's livelihoods depend on where they are currently, and without lots of our aid, they won't be able to survive in a new area, ending up homeless and starving. So essentially, the effects of disaster mitigation remain long after disaster itself, but relocation happens once, while disaster mitigation may lead to future disasters being prevented or subdued. Relocation must be done over and over again for each disaster. So that I go on to my points of substance. That first of all, disaster mitigation can be done at a larger scale and reach more people at once, being more effective. This is because disaster mitigation targets the systems which affect everyone, while relocation targets the individual person, still living in and adhering to the unideal circumstances. Disaster mitigation basically generates the optimum conditions needed to minimize the damage that disasters have on life. Relocation is designed merely to remove the most vulnerable actors without addressing the root causes of disaster, which mitigation actually does. And when they return with the same vulnerability. If they don't return, they lose a home entirely and will most likely struggle economically. Now, when it comes to relocation, we're essentially evacuating people from an area before it's being hit. But then what? Stressed out food banks, endless financial aid, which empties our coffers? For the same amount of money, you can choose to improve the scale, range, and speed of emergency services, or you can choose to relocate 100 people, providing housing and proper essentials, sure, but leaving the other thousands behind. Disaster mitigation also serves our state obligation more. Protecting populations doesn't stop at merely to live or to die, but to live and to thrive. While life is our priority first and foremost, we can't disregard how the people are living. How can we simply relocate people and have them watch as their livestock are crushed under rubble or washed away? How can we allow them to return to a home in dust, in pieces, and say that we're fulfilling our responsibility to our maximum capability? It's simple. We can't. Disaster mitigation protects life. Relocation only protects survival. Now, why is this more likely to manifest on our side? Because we protect both people and their assets, their livelihoods. Hence, I would like to end this speech severely stressing that we cannot merely stop at just protecting the survival of a people alone. We must protect their lives, their livelihoods, their mental state, and their happiness. That is our obligation as a state. Thank you.